Hi, this is Liz Wendling, the host of the Everyone Sells Something show, a show that's geared toward entrepreneurs, business owners, and professionals who love what they do, but they don't love the sales part of their business. But they're smart enough to know that no sales is going to equal no business. I believe everyone does sell something. Whether you sell a product, a service, an idea, a passion, a talent, or a skill, you are in sales. If what you do requires you to have conversations with people, build relationships, and have sales meetings, and eventually close those conversations and meetings into closed business, you are in sales. You are selling every day through your actions and your words. And your ability to communicate effectively will determine if people will trust you, buy from you, follow you, listen to you, or dismiss you. So today's episode is on follow up, one of my favorite topics to talk about, because there is a big difference between bland and boring follow up that falls flat and fails to engage someone's attention, and follow up that gets read and gets a response. If you send messages with the outdated words and phrases of just following up, just touching base, just reaching out, and just checking in, you're in the right place. Let's hop in and talk about failed or fantastic follow-up. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let's hop in. Let's talk about what does awesome follow-up sound like, and how do you have great results with your follow-up. So we're going to dive into some examples as well. But before we get started with all of my shows, what I'd like you to take away is I want you to offer you a little glimpse into a different way of doing things. And I want you to have another option for how you're approaching sales, how you're following up. And I want to challenge your sales mindset and your skill set throughout the process. Because if people aren't getting back to you, if you are getting blown off, if people aren't responding to your messages, there's a reason for that. Something is happening in your follow up that's causing people not to want to engage with you. So, in our time together, I'm going to scratch the surface around the common follow up mistakes. And by mistakes, I mean it's not enough follow up, too much follow up done poorly, follow up done generically, annoyingly, and not professionally. How you follow up has the power to engage and open people up to trust you and do business with you. And it also has the potential to shut people down and cause them to doubt you and delete you. There are certain follow-up phrases and methods that no longer work today. And continued use of these will actually start training people to ignore you and your messages. So there's a reason why certain words and phrases, some predictable phrases, suck the power out of your communication and weaken your message. And many of them have a very similar theme and an outdated feel. And I'm going to give you some examples. But think of it this way: everyone is overloaded. What feels like an endless stream of daily emails that come to us. So you don't have the opportunity. You can't waste time and energy sending messages that don't create any kind of momentum or get anyone's attention. Now, I'm not suggesting that you've got to dump and destroy everything you're doing when it comes to follow up, but I am suggesting that you take a hard look at the follow up language that you are using, because you may need a tweak, you may need to change something, and you may need to eliminate some of the things that you're doing and replace it with something that works better. You're going to leave here today with the understanding of how to follow up with people so they engage with you and not blow you off. We've all had that experience of having a great conversation with someone and the sale is moving forward, and then somebody just blows you off or ghosts you completely. And when you think of it about it this way, follow up and following up has been around for decades. But the way people follow up these days is the same exact way that people have been following up for the 20 and 30 years. The follow-up methods and language that people are using are behind the times and they fall flat. And every day people tell me, Liz, I can't get anybody to respond to my emails or voicemails. I leave message after message and no one gets back to me. I feel like I'm emailing and voicemailing, and those emails and voicemails are going into a black hole. And I call that a very expensive black hole, because that's where opportunities, money, and sales disappear forever. So if this is happening to you, it's typically because your follow-up sounds like everyone else on the planet. So like I said, there's a difference between a follow-up email that's ignored and an email that creates engagement. An email that gets a response versus one that gets deleted. The differences are subtle, but the results are powerful. There's an old sales phrase you may have heard, and it's called, there's fortune in the follow-up. And I agree, you have to follow up and you have to keep the momentum going, but that outdated phrase only tells half the story. That phrase should now state the fortune is in how you follow up. It's what you say in your follow-up, because old school, just following up, just touching base emails or voicemails won't cut it anymore. So let's talk about the F word. And the F word has some counterparts to it. And that is touching base, reaching out, and checking in. So following up, touching base, reaching out, and checking in. Let me give you a couple of examples and think to yourself, have you ever sent an email like this? Or does your email sound like this right now? Emails, voicemails, or any kind of correspondence. And I want you to be thinking about the familiar feel that a lot of these have to it, and think about the amount of follow-up messages that people are getting in their inbox. And if you want to stand out, if you send messages that sound like this, I promise you, you are blending in. And they sound like, hi, Marie. I wanted to follow up to see if you had any questions regarding the proposal I sent. Hey, Jason, I'm just touching base to see if you're interested in placing that order. Hey, Samantha, I wanted to reach out again since I haven't heard from you, and I want to see if you're ready to get going on that project. Hey, Vito, I wanted to check in one more time to make sure you have the information you need regarding the products you and I were talking about. Hi, Tammy. Wanted to reach out to see if you're still interested in creating that promotional material. Hey, Michael, I'm following up after our meeting last week. And the hits keep coming. If you have to send a message that says, hey, Layla, I was just checking in again, or I was just checking in, not sure if you got my last 11 emails, apparently your follow-up messages are not hitting the target. If you have to keep following up, it means that what you're saying isn't getting their attention. This type of follow-up is the fastest and most effective way for people to delete you and ignore you. And today's the last day you have to send outdated voicemails and emails like that sound like you got stuck in the 1980s and 90s. Nothing screams 80s and 90s quite like just touching base, following up, reaching out, and checking in. I always say these words are thrown around like confetti, and they're used way too much. Emails that use the language in the examples I just shared are actually annoying and is very disruptive to the recipient, because they probably have 2 or 3 dozen emails in their inbox that sound exactly the same. So if you're attempting to reconnect and get back to people by using the same language as everyone else, how could your prospective clients differentiate you from anyone else in their inbox? Now, let me be clear. You do need to follow up. Yes, you do need to communicate with your clients and potential clients. But when you do so using generic messages like everyone else, it does not work. And I know this because when I start working with a client or a corporation, I have them send me their email correspondence or some of the voicemails that they have left, or any type of correspondence where they're trying to communicate with someone to move the sale forward. And I always see just checking in, following up, touching base, and reaching out. So I know it's happening, and it's likely happening to you as well. And some people like the F word so much, or their counterparts, that they actually use it in the subject line. Oh, if you're doing that, stop that immediately. You are further putting yourself into the delete and getting shuttled off to the trash if you put that in the subject line. And I'll tell you why in a little bit. But in today's busy, fast-paced world of constant intrusions, people are reading their emails with their finger on the delete button. And you can't afford to interrupt people and your prospects and potential clients and customers without providing them some value and a compelling reason for them to keep a verbal exchange going on. The common follow-up language being used winds up creating an imbalance between you and your prospect. And when you have an imbalance, that imbalance is where a lot of the sales chasing games begin. The chasing starts and the games begin in the sense that they start treating you differently. It's a place where your potential clients, ideal customers, and potential customers start treating you like a less than, start treating you differently. And even though I know you're well intended and you're doing your job, but this language doesn't inspire them. It doesn't inspire them to respond, and it doesn't get the impact that you're looking to get when you're following up with people. So what winds up happening is people resist your message. They become less trusting, less engaged, less interested, and they wind up backing away. And maybe if they do get back to you, they say, oh, I need to think it over. It's too expensive. I don't have the money. Now's not the right time. Call me in a few months. And they push you away. So there's nothing wrong with following up, but there's something wrong with a follow-up message that screams, I have no respect for your time or your inbox. And whenever I'm speaking or doing a training, people will say to me, but I want to stay in front of a prospect. I want to make sure that they know that I'm still in the game and that I'm still interested in doing business with them. I want my customer to know that I haven't forgotten them. I want to stay on top of mind. And that's fine. I get that. But there's a better way to do this. If you want to be top of mind, but you're using old school, outdated, and causing frustration and annoyance to your potential client, you may be staying top of mind, but that top of mind may mean that they're saying, I don't want to do business with this person. What a pain in the butt. This person just keeps emailing and emailing me, touching base, following up with no value. Now, they might not be saying that consciously, but they're feeling a disconnect. They're not liking you very much because you're bloating their inbox with messages that don't inspire them to respond to you. And I know that following up, touching base, checking in, and reaching out emails make you feel like you're moving a prospect forward, but it's not. They may make you feel like you're keeping that momentum going, but it's not. If your previous emails to a potential client and prospect have no value, you won't get a response. Now, hear this. People value follow-up. They do, but only if there's value in your follow-up. Again, people value follow-up. They do. They want someone to be in the conversation with them, but there has to be value in the follow-up. Follow-up is an event. Follow-up is not a one-time event. It's not an event. It's a process when you think about how you follow up. So instead of just following up, I want you to stop and pause and think about what you can say to create impact that moves the conversation forward. Because when you think about it, your follow-up messages are to create some momentum and nudge somebody forward just a little bit. So I know you want to keep that momentum going, but what happens is you wind up stopping it. So think about what you can say, how you can change your communication so that the momentum continues and you don't get shuttled off into the trash. Because if you're there, then you've got to start it all over again. And you wind up sending another follow-up messages that have this low-level neediness attached to it. And you want to look at communicating in a way that drives a little action, that drives a little momentum. And too often I see people communicate and follow up in such a way that doesn't have any momentum or move the conversation forward. It actually causes it to stop in its tracks. So what I teach my clients is one of the first things to do, and you're probably already doing it, but I want you to be thinking about, can I do this a little better? What I teach my clients is to talk about follow-up, schedule a follow-up prior to leaving an appointment or signing off a Zoom call, and say something like, Mary, how would you like us to stay connected during your decision-making process? Sally, how would you like me to reconnect with you in a few weeks? When would you like to have our next conversation? How do you want us to communicate moving forward? Do you like email? Do you like voicemail? Would you like me to text you? How would you like us to keep the conversation going? You have to, in the moment, create that collaborative follow-up process, because when you get the other person engaged in follow-up, you get to use what I call their words. So let's say Mary did say, oh, you know what, why don't we reconnect in 2 weeks? You can send an email that says, hey, Mary, 2 weeks ago when you and I met, you suggested we reconnect today. You don't have to say, hey, I'm just following up, touching base, reaching out, checking in. You already have Mary's language. You get to use her or his language in that follow-up. So you never have to drop an F-bomb. You get to engage with someone in a respectful way where you have a conversation with a potential client or prospect, and you don't have to engage in those follow-up games that just aggravate and irritate people. And when you follow up in a way that's collaborative, it will never feel like you're bothering people. And there's this crummy dynamic when in the follow-up conversation that doesn't put you in control when you are just following up, touching base, reaching out and checking in. When you are collaborative, it doesn't have that crummy dynamic. It actually has a positive dynamic to the conversation, because you don't feel like you're less than and you've got to intrude. You've already had that conversation, and now that conversation can be collaborative moving forward. So something else I teach my clients is this. Here's the fix. It's so easy, is remove the words, just touching base, reaching out, checking in, and following up from every voicemail and every email and every subject line that you send. First of all, think about it. Why do you have to announce that you're doing the activity? It's obvious you're getting back to someone. Just following up. Yeah, I know you are. You're getting back to me. Leave out those words, leave out those 4 words. And I challenge you to write emails or those voicemails that don't include that language. Here's why. When you take that language out, it strips you off of autopilot, and you've got to engage in a different way in that message. A different and a noticeable way shows up. It forces you to communicate with intention versus being on autopilot. I told you earlier, I read hundreds of messages a week, and it sounds like people just opened up an email, put in some kind of subject line and said, hey, Bob, I just wanted to follow up. There was no thought put in that. That message will not be received in the way you want it if you're sounding like everyone else and you don't put any thought into those follow-ups. You don't need to announce that you're following up. You're doing that. You need to treat someone's inbox like your own and skip the words that add no value. They don't move you forward. They don't create momentum. And it's the very reason why you have to follow up 6, 8, 10, 20 times with someone. It's because your follow-up didn't have any value. You are wasting someone's time and your own when you keep following up in a way that does not create momentum. You have to ask yourself, if I have to follow up that many times, my message must be lacking impact. If your prospects or potential clients aren't engaging with you, it is time to shake things up, rattle the cage, and change your language so you can change your results. How can prospects differentiate you from anyone else that lands in their inbox? So take yourself off autopilot and start engaging in a very different and noticeable way, and watch what happens to the response that you get. And it really does force you to be articulate, and why it would be in the receiver's interest to reply. Make it easy for them to reply. When you send something that just says, just following up to see if you're ready to get started, there isn't enough energy and momentum in something like that. You want to put a little more meat on the bones to make them want to continue that conversation with you. So before you just go ahead and change your language, I want you to ask yourself a series of questions before you start changing your messaging. Ask yourself, did I take the time to establish the rules of follow-up with my prospect? Did I have a conversation with that person of how we're going to respectfully stay connected? Have I added value to the communication I just tapped out or ready to leave a voicemail? Is that communication going to land with impact? Did I ask my prospect when we will continue the conversation? Um, did we discuss and define what those next steps are? Discuss and define what those next steps are critical to gathering momentum. And then ask yourself, did I ask how we will openly communicate moving forward while being respectful? Discussing the rules of communication will save you so much time and help you with your correspondence to be viewed as someone who's sending a welcomed email or a voicemail as opposed to being an annoyance. You can radically change the way your prospects interact and stay in touch with you. As long as you're creative, you get to be creative, be different. When you're innovative in your approach, you do produce different results. And when you change your language, you stand out and you win more business. You can tap out daily emails using a modern and dynamic message and email to ensure that you're coming from that position of strength and confidence. But you have to ask yourself, would I even open my own email? So the next time you want to use the F word, I want you to stop and find something better to say. You're going to need a little time unraveling this autopilot behavior. You'll need a little time, a couple of extra seconds to write an email, but it's going to be worth it. The development of effective follow-up language is going to take a little time and practice. It has to be unique to you, and it's not a one-size-fits-all. Just following up, touching base, reaching out, and checking in is a one-size-fits-all, and I tell you, the whole world is using it. So getting off that autopilot is going to require you to spend some time thinking about what you want to say and convey to someone before hitting that send. Because crafting well-written emails absolutely force you to clarify your intention and concentrate on the power of your message. It forces you to examine your work and take yourself off of just tapping something out that you've tapped out 1,000 times. Now, this won't take forever, but only until you train yourself into sending emails that land with impact, sending emails that engage people. You have full control of your online communication. I tell my clients, your language attracts or repels. Your words create interest or they create resistance. So I'm going to leave you with a task and a challenge. I want you to start following up, starting today. That's different. It's fresh, it's welcomed, and it feels customized, because customized and personalization equals high perceived value. That is what they will respond to messages like that. When they get a message that has some personalization, that it feels like there's some inherent value inside that email. High personalization trumps generic emails all the time. If your written communication is the bulk of your communication, it may be time to take a look at what you're sending out there. You can change what you're putting out there and also what you get back. So starting today, follow up, checking in, touching base, and reaching out should never leave your lips. You don't have to announce to anyone that you're doing the activity. Don't forget to ask people, how are we going to stay engaged during this process? How would you like me to communicate with you? Take yourself off of autopilot and start creating customized and highly personalized emails to clients, prospective clients, and customers, and watch what happens to how fast people get back to you, the responses you get back, and the engagement you receive from people. It works like magic. Report back to me. Let me know if you've gotten some great results from leaving out, following up, touching base, reaching out, and checking in. I could be reached at lizwendling.com, or my email is liz@lizwendling.com. I'm sorry, my website's lizwendling.com. And I'm all over LinkedIn and YouTube, and I have lots of little snippets and videos that can help you with your language, not just in your follow up. Thank you for your time, and I'll see you on the next show.